Hello and welcome to Can't Find My Way Home, the podcast where expats from around the globe talk about the music and art scene in their adopted home. I'm your host, Craig. On the first episode back after our summer break, I was joined by Justin Jardine. Justin talks us through his expat journey from Wisconsin to Hamburg via Freiburg and Vienna. We also dig deep into his musical exploits along the way. Discovering guitars and distortion at an early age, Justin really got into the thriving punk scene at home. We talk DIY, under the radar and pop-up gigs, and Justin describes how it helped him become more politically and socially aware, and how this also led to his musical taste changing over time. Moving abroad opened up a whole new avenue of opportunities and possibilities. Who knew that there was a bluegrass scene in Hamburg? Justin tells us all about it, as well as his main project, Raindance Kid. We talk differences in playing in a band as an expat and playing in one at home, putting shows together and touring, and how he got into playing pedal steel guitar. There's opera houses, the Lemonheads, Sturgill Simpson's weird synth player, and just why has Justin been in so many bands with Kid in the name? You'll also hear a track from Raindance Kid at the end of the episode, so gotta stick around for that. Without further ado, here's Justin Jardine. Joining me today is Justin Jardine.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Today we're going to have a look at your expat story, and also we're going to get into some of this great music that you've been making and have made in the past. How about you tell us about yourself?
Well, I grew up in Wisconsin in the U.S. That's where I was born and raised. And I started playing music when I was about 10, got my first guitar, joined my first band. I should say I played my first show when I was about 14, something like that. Yeah, I played in some more bands through my early 20s, and then I moved to Germany. Studied abroad first in Freiburg in the south, and after that I moved to Vienna, did some English teaching. Yeah, now I'm back in Germany, up in Hamburg. Been here for about 5 years.
The whole kind of German connection, I guess this is what people are always kind of asking. So how did you end up where you are today? But for you, it was, you did it through university, a year study abroad?
Yeah, well, that was the first time that I moved here. I guess the whole reason is kind of tied into music as well, in keeping with, I guess, the theme of this podcast. I was playing in a band I guess that would have been middle school, because in high school we had to pick a language to study, and my high school had German, had French, had Spanish, and I think they had Japanese as well as like distance learning. We were driving to a concert out of town somewhere, and one of our friends was riding with us. He was a year older, so already in high school, and he just told us to take German because the teacher was funny. There's no other reason than that. Just that
It's a bit abstract, but it'll do, yeah.
Yeah, and I honestly hadn't given it any thought, really, what language I would take. I didn't have any special connection to German or to anything, really. So I just took German because he said the teacher was cool, and she was. I think she taught us kind of a lot of bullshit, but she was
she was quite good at that.
She was definitely funny, and so it's kind of funny. It's kind of surreal to think that, he just kind of made this offhand comment about how we should take German for a pretty trivial reason. And here I've been living in German-speaking countries for almost 10 years.
Wow, yeah.
That would have happened if he would have said to take Spanish, or if he said the teacher wasn't cool.
Definitely, it's a sliding doors moment, yeah, when it's you pick this way or that way, and wait and see how it goes. Maybe we get a little bit more into your music then. So how did you start out? You were saying you were 14 when you played your first show?
Yeah, I did say that. Now that I think of it, that's not true. That was, I played a couple talent shows before that.
Okay.
So maybe I was like 12.
But you picked up the guitar pretty young then, yeah?
Yeah, I started playing when I was 10. In my house, we had one of those, like, I don't even know what they're called, those like electric organs with all the buttons and stuff. I would play songs with my mom, who like knew a couple songs on that organ. Heart and Soul, I guess, is the one everybody knows. So I guess like I kind of had music in me already. I mean, we weren't playing in any serious way on the organ, and my mom's not a musician. She just knows a couple things. But I went to my cousin's, and he got an electric guitar and asked me if I wanted to try it out. And so I plugged it in, and it was my first time ever touching electric guitar and like kind of seeing how, what it's like to play with distortion, I guess, really. 'Cause I was 10 years old, and you'd think like, oh yeah, a lot of distortion.
What is this?
And yeah, and then so I begged my parents to get me a guitar for Christmas or my birthday or one of those things.
Does Wisconsin have a thriving music scene? Was there a lot of bar activities for you to go and play in?
Yeah, but I got into punk music when I was a teenager, around the time I started playing those first shows. So the band I was in, we started off with like Nirvana covers and stuff like that, and then eventually migrated towards more punk music. I guess some people might call Nirvana punk, but
Punk in a more conventional sense of the word,
yeah.
right? And
yeah, like this is kind of more like DIY ethic of punk music, which of course I started out at as well. But yeah, so Wisconsin, or Madison is the city. It's the capital. It's also where I grew up, right outside of Madison. They had a punk scene, and we somehow got involved with that. I think that's kind of the thing with punk music. You just kind of throw concerts anywhere. So there are all sorts of basements, warehouses, just kind of makeshift venues all around town that would open up and then inevitably get shut down by the cops or the fire department or whatever, evict the people who lived there.
yeah, it sounds like a precursor to the whole pop-up thing, right?
Yeah, pop-up venues basically. So I guess I never really had too much of a problem going to shows because, these like kind of underground DIY shows that didn't take place at bars, they didn't have age limits. And from what I hear, that's not really a thing so much at least in Madison anymore. I have a lot of friends who are still very active in that scene, and it's just super hard for them to find something. So a lot of the shows end up happening at bars because it's the only sustainable venue that wouldn't cost an arm and a leg to open.
Definitely.
Which is too bad. And it's also kind of a shame that it shouldn't just have to be punk music that can be played in the basement somewhere. I mean, you should be able to have any type of music played anywhere. And maybe that's ignorant speaking. Maybe that does happen. But my experience in Wisconsin anyway was that these kind of under the radar shows were pretty much always punk and metal, which is cool. I mean, I'm into that, but it can be kind of insular.
It's one of these things, though, that they always say, in various magazines or video or MTV, whenever that was around, but they would always talk about the loyalty or the loyal nature of metal fans and punk fans, right? They were always around, and they were always... So in a lot of ways, this kind of makes sense just by the very nature of the people themselves and the music.
Yeah, well, it's a type of music, I think, that's also tied to like a certain philosophy or ideology. And so I guess it would make sense that the fans stay loyal to that. I mean, it definitely taught me a lot about, I guess, being mindful or being politically and socially aware. I think at some point, though, I realized that it's not the only music that does that. And I think that's one of the faults of punk music, is that it kind of almost claims to be.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view, I think. But I think you only kind of learn that through your own experiences, though.
Yeah, it's also a part of just growing up. And
I think, one of these things when people talk about, punk music or metal for that matter, it's a bit stereotypical. It's like kind of 95% men, denim patch jackets and all that kind of stuff. And, it gets into the world of
uniform in that genre as there isn't any other.
Right. It gets into the world of Bill and Ted's and whatnot, and all sorts of stereotypical stuff and all that. And what was your next step then, musically, when you went to college? And
yeah, I went to college. I got out of the band. I was actually kicked out of the band that I started in middle school. I was kicked out of it when I was like 17, which really kind of hurt, because we were kind of doing some stuff. Like we started going on tour around the Midwest in the US and the East Coast when we were like 16 or 17. And I mean, like the people in our local community, like they liked us. They thought we were good. And I guess we were pretty good. But yeah, just getting kicked out kind of sucked. But in hindsight, it ended up being a really good thing, because I think those people that I was playing with in that band, I was pretty impressionable. I think I was also kind of afraid of what they thought of me, and if I were to listen to anything that wasn't like hardcore punk and metal and grindcore and stuff like that, I'd probably get made of, and I just wasn't ready to handle that. So after I got kicked out of the band, I moved up a couple hours north to a city called Appleton. Went there for my first year of college, and I lived in a punk house called the BFG, with a bunch of musicians, super open-minded musicians who play in And bands that, some of them got kind of popular. Tenement would be one band. Dusk is a band that's still going on right now that some of them are in. And so I just learned a bunch of new music living there. So that led me to, I guess my next phase in music was probably more like kind of 90s alternative music. So I got to know bands like the Lemonheads.
I was just listening to them yesterday, funnily enough, right?
They're still one of my favorite bands. I love it.
Great jangly guitars, man.
Yeah, it's super good. I used to just play along to full albums. Yeah, so stuff like that, and Dinosaur Jr., and Sugar, which is Bob Mould's band from Husker Du.
Yeah, right.
So I got into that stuff next. That was cool because it was kind of raw. It had, it didn't feel too far from punk, but they were also kind of way better at their instruments, which was more interesting for me as a guitar player. That's also fun to play.
Yeah, I mean, musically, it was adding maybe a different dynamic to your own playing as well.
Yeah, it was a gateway to, I guess, other types of music that have more complicated playing, I guess, moving from power chords to normal chords, and then from there you can get real jazzy.
And at this point, were you recording some stuff as well? Was it more of a live scene, or did you get into the recording side of things as well?
Yeah, that's around the time that I had my first studio experience, I think. The band that I joined when I moved there was coincidentally another Kid band, Harlequin Kid. And
this is uncanny, Justin.
It's I can connect the dots on that in a second. That was the first band I went to a studio with my band in high school that I got kicked out of. We did some demos in the basement and we released a couple cassettes. But my first real studio recording experience was with this band Harlequin Kid. Yeah, and the story in that is, we called ourselves Harlequin Kid. Then I moved away to study abroad in Germany after a year or maybe 2 years with that band. And they kind of made the joke, while you're gone, we'll keep on playing shows, but we'll just play everything super slow like a stoner band, and we'll call it Green Kid. And of course they never did that. And I was thinking, that's kind of a cool name, actually. So I took it for my solo thing. So there is a direct through line between Harlequin Kid and Green Kid. But Raindance Kid was just a total coincidence.
Would you say, though, you met a lot of like-minded people at this point, when you'd moved on to the new things?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that some of those guys are still some of my best friends. And, I really enjoy hearing the different music they put out. I mean, these are people who've played in punk and hardcore bands, but also have released soul and country records. So, just really inspiring people.
Well, that's really cool. But you were saying that it was time to move abroad. And what happened musically? Did you leave your gear at home, or did you pick up an acoustic when you were away, or did it just kind of go on to use that Friends line, it's you were on a break?
Yeah, I was on a break in the sense that I was too broke, or at least too cheap to buy a guitar when I was there. I had a couple of friends who had guitars, and every time I'd see them, I'd always play. But thinking back, I don't know how I did that. I don't know why I didn't just get a guitar for $50 or whatever. About halfway through the year, I did meet an older guy named Georg, who I'm still good friends with to this day. He has a Beatles guitar collection. Obviously not the actual guitars that they played, but he collected the exact models that they played.
So like Epiphone Casinos and
stuff like that.
Rickenbackers and whatnot.
He has, I don't even know how many guitars.
Yeah, you'd spend an interesting afternoon at his house, I think.
Definitely.
Which leads us on nicely then maybe to the music connection again. What have you been doing musically in your time in Hamburg?
Yeah, so just before I moved to Hamburg, I started listening to kind of more folk and country and bluegrass and stuff like that. And that, I know it sounds like I'm getting off track. It'll come back around to Hamburg, I swear. But
yeah, it's all good, man.
So when I was younger, when I was in high school, I worked at this theater in this town called Stoughton. It was called the Stoughton Opera House, which is not an actual opera. I mean, at some point they probably did opera, but there wasn't really any opera going on. It was just called
just a bit of a grand name.
Yeah, and around that time, it was kind of experiencing a renaissance, and all these really good musicians, like bluegrass and folk musicians, would come through. when I would work all these concerts and see them, but I had no idea who they were because I wasn't plugged into that scene. I didn't know who the big names were. And frankly, I just didn't really care. And so around 2014, just before moving to Hamburg, maybe about a half a year, or maybe a year before moving to Hamburg, I wanted to hear something new. So I decided to check out some of those musicians that came through that I, theoretically had the chance to meet and work for and all this stuff, but wasn't paying attention. Yeah, the first person I listened to was Gillian Welch, and specifically the song called Time the Revelator, a live version on YouTube, I think live at Cambridge or something like that. And it's just two people. It's just Gillian Welch and Dave Rawlings. They both play guitar and both sing. And it just built this beautiful arc. It's about 7 or 8 minutes long, and it crescendos into this huge explosion where Dave Rawlings just starts pounding away on his acoustic guitar. It was the punkest thing I've ever heard. It was insane. And so from there I was hooked, and I just started listening to more, like I said, folk and bluegrass music, stuff like that, and country. And so when I moved to Hamburg, I got in touch with some musicians because I was looking for a place to live, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to live with other musicians.
So, right. What could go wrong?
I posted in some Facebook groups and got in touch with some people, and eventually somebody told me about the bluegrass scene in Hamburg. There's a bluegrass session that goes on every month. Not anymore, obviously. I should say we're on a break from that right now. Yeah, so I started going to that pretty much right away, and that was the first time I really played bluegrass music with people. So I learned a lot doing that, and so basically I started playing with people as soon as I moved here, and that's also how I met a lot of people.
That's usually how music works. You find like-minded souls through open mic nights or by chance, maybe even, it's
yeah, and it's such a, like, bluegrass specifically is such a good genre of music to play with other people because you don't have to know the songs. They all have a similar structure, basically just use 3 chords, G, C, and D in some order, and you alternate between a verse and a chorus, and so you can just play along. It doesn't matter if you've heard the song before.
I meant to say, did you see the Sturgill Simpson concert that he put out a month ago, maybe, from the Ryman?
No, I didn't.
Jason Isbell did one maybe the month before that as well. He did it with his wife, Amanda Shire, so she was playing the fiddle, and he was playing songs from his new album, but Sturgill Simpson basically did it with a bluegrass band.
Crazy.
It's definitely worth checking out. It was awesome. It was great. And of course, there's no one in the audience, right? So it's all that you can see little screens around the top of the main screen where people are watching.
Was it just like some pickup band, or?
No, I think these were like real cats. They were all. I can't remember offhand who they were, but they were pretty good.
I'll have to check that out. It sounds interesting. I didn't really start listening to Sturgill Simpson until recently. I still don't know a lot of his stuff. Yeah, I went to his show in Hamburg. When was that, like December or something? Yeah, it was good, just not what any of us expected.
Was he a bit more rock and roll?
Yeah, it was definitely harder, and he didn't do a lot of singing. It was a lot of like guitar jammy stuff, which sounded cool, but we went kind of hoping to hear his signature signature voice, and he did a lot of singing. And there was this weird synth player, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but
yeah, he's a really kind of versatile guy.
I need to listen to more of him. I don't really know his back catalog or anything. I'm still pretty new to the Simpson.
What would you say are some of the differences playing in a band as an expat than there are in your time playing in a band at home?
I'm not sure if this is a huge kind of like expat versus US musician difference, but it might just have more to do with living in a big city versus living in like a medium-sized city. But like back in Wisconsin, we'd always just have band practice in the basement. But here, like, everybody lives in apartment buildings. There is no basement. And so, we have a rehearsal space, which was kind of a new concept to me. I've never paid rent for a rehearsal space before. We just went down to the basement and played. That's the biggest difference I can really think of. People here are maybe more hospitable to touring bands. You always get something to eat, for example, but
you get fed and watered, eh?
Yeah, but I guess I always had pretty good experiences in the US with that. I never really felt like we were starving.
Yeah, we should say, because we met, it was either November or December when your band Raindance Kid were playing in Dortmund.
I think that was October.
Oh, was I? It was dark, I remember that much. I was close enough. And
Yeah.
just speaking of that, you were doing like a tour at that time. So are gigs quite easy to come by? I mean, I'm pretty sure now things have changed, but I mean, if we talk in the past tense, what's it like trying to put shows together? And
It comes the easiest if you have a personal connection to the people who are booking the shows. And I say that as both a musician and a promoter, because I do some booking as well. I don't know, like I think our singer who booked the majority of the tour, or at least a lot of it, probably sent out 200 emails, maybe got back 3 replies.
Jesus,
It's really hard to get in touch with people if you don't know them, because, and I always thought that was stupid. I didn't know why that was, but then I started doing a bit of booking somewhere, and they gave me access to the email, and I saw we'd be getting like 10 requests per day, and you just can't keep up on that. Can't listen to them all, and I mean, I guess you could probably reply to them all, but that's a part-time job in and of itself. So it started to make sense, but that doesn't make it any less frustrating.
no, definitely.
The Sub Rosa gig in Dortmund where we met, that happened because our acoustic guitar player, I think, knew the guy somehow. And there were maybe 3 or 4 other shows on that tour that were put together because there's a label in Oberhausen called Cozy Records, and we did a song that ended up on a soundtrack for a film that they put out. And so they've always been really, really nice to us, and they helped us out with a bunch of shows there. That happened because we knew somebody.
Right. I was going to say it's hard. It sounds quite difficult to get your foot in the door somewhere if you're not really, you don't know anyone. It's and like you were saying, if they have all these emails coming in with numerous requests, it's probably just a case of the bookers, as now you've experienced yourself, it's them sticking to maybe what they know or who they know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other thing is we're not really part of a subculture, this band. We haven't really found a scene, I guess, that we fit in. Playing in a punk band, you'll find all sorts of people who just want to see a punk band. They kind of know it's going to be more or less like this, and there's going to be a lot of energy, and it's pretty reliable almost. I think people who listen to punk music are also a bit more proactive about making sure that shows happen and that there's a place for them to happen. And so maybe that's another reason why it's easier, or it seems easier anyway, to get shows as a punk band. But playing the type of music that we play, it's hard because people have to take a chance on us. People have to invest maybe a little bit more in the experience.
Which leads us up to a really nice segue there, Justin, because the band Raindance Kid, how would you describe yourselves? What's the elevator pitch then, since we're in that kind of that zone?
We used to say that we were post-folk. We play music with, we have a banjo player, which I guess is how the folk thing comes into play. But I really don't think we're a folk band, so that didn't really seem to fit. On that tour last October where we met, somebody described us as country noir, which I thought sounded really cool. So that's what we're going with right now.
Excellent. All right, that's not bad at all. But yeah, I was really I got to the gig, maybe you'd started 5 or 10 minutes, so I came in and it was quite a full house that night in Dortmund. Yeah, there was a reasonable crowd.
That was some sort of like event series that happened like every Friday or once a month or something like that, and they said that was the largest turnout they've had, which was definitely had nothing to do with us because nobody knows who we are. But yeah, we got lucky. That was a fun night.
That was a fun night, and it was, as I was just about to say, the sound of the band. I never really like putting bands in boxes, but it's a way of letting other people know what you are or how you sound like, or to give them an idea, right? And it's, people don't like being pigeonholed in these kind of certain things. But when you take these elements, because we could talk about, I actually couldn't see you on the stage. I could see the drummer, and I could see the frontman was wearing a very big hat. I remember that.
Yeah.
With his banjo, with the banjo, they're kind of hard to miss. And I think you were at the side. I forget what side, but you were at the side of the stage. You were actually playing guitar, but you were playing something as well. You were playing something else as well. How did that come about? What was your other instruments?
That was a pedal steel. I started playing that 3 or 4 years ago. I want to say 3 because then if I say 4, I should be better than I am. But so we'll say 3. And Yeah, that's an instrument that you hear a lot in country music.
Definitely, yeah.
It has kind of that twangy sound. It's essentially a slide guitar with pedals with which you can kind of modulate the notes and gives you these really fluid transitions from one note to another. It's kind of an instrument that's used to emulate the human voice in a way. And there's different kind of ways to play it. So there's the typical like country sound that we all hear, but there's also a type of pedal steel playing called, what's it called? Southern steel. It's a type of playing that's played in churches in the South, and it's in kind of have, it sounds like a soul singer. It's beautiful.
What was it got you hooked on that? Because you don't see many of them around. I mean, sadly, I guess unless you live in Nashville or something, right? It's
Yeah, well, it's still a very small community, and even the most popular pedal steel players, most people wouldn't know them, and even the most successful, like, they're accessible. You could email them and they would respond for the most part. Yeah, so it's a really small community, but also very supportive. There are different forums and message boards. Yeah, and people don't really seem to be competitive.
okay. So it's definitely more of a sharing community than a, because guitar players are maybe not known. I think just between us, guitar players are not really known for their sharing and kind of nature, are they?
Everybody plays guitar. Like if there's if there are two pedal steel players in a room, like, they're gonna start talking to each other because it's a thing that not a lot of people do. Whereas if two guitar players in a room, it's not interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think your question was how I got started with that. I don't even know what made me buy a pedal steel.
Was it quite easy to pick one up? I know that might sound a bit of a naive question, but did you buy it from Thomann or something like that, or from a music store?
No, you can here in Germany anyway. You can pretty much only get them used. There's one company called WBS that still makes them, and there used to be a company called ABM, which is a subsidiary of Framus, I want to say, but they're not around anymore. But yeah, my first pedal steel was this ABM. I got it on eBay, like $700 or $800, which is pretty cheap for steel. Like, they're not like it's a pretty high entry price, unfortunately. But I found one in the area, and it was also what I was about willing to spend for my first pedal steel. I wasn't going to go out and spend $2,000 right away. Yeah, and I found one in the area. I went and picked it up, and yeah, found out kind of the things that work for me, the things that don't. There's all sorts of different setups as well, different configurations for how many pedals you have, how many knee levers you have, which strings they bend. And so I kind of figured out what worked for me and ended up moving up to a different one. How
did your bandmates take to it? Were they quite enthusiastic about the idea of you getting into this new line of playing?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they were interested in the opportunities that it opened up, and obviously I've worked it into the band. I play it on a few songs, but I'm also the one in the band who listens to the most country. Like, our singer plays banjo, but he actually doesn't really listen to any bluegrass or country music or anything like that. So I always run the risk of kind of overdoing it with my country and folk influences. I think the pedal steel is definitely added to the band. I don't think I've overdone it.
I don't remember how many songs it was on. You'll know exactly, but yeah, it was a nice balance. It was a nice mix that night. You knew it was there, but I couldn't see you, so I was like, okay, where's this coming from?
Yeah,
it was a little subtle undertone.
Yeah, maybe that's I'll go with that. I was gonna say that probably has something to do with my capabilities as well. It's subtle.
Yeah, okay. I mean that in a complimentary way.
Yeah, I took it
most definitely. Yeah, I was going to say. I didn't mean that in a kind of shitty way. Sorry.
No.
Maybe this is a chance where we can have a listen to one of the songs from Raindance Kid.
Yeah, this song's called Letter to David. It's off our album Swear, which came out about 2.5 years ago. Yeah, you can find it on Spotify. You can order it from the internet somewhere. Yeah, it's a fun song.
I ain't no preacher man, while your mouth speaks praise, my wicked tongue's blue from wine and smoke, and songs of blasphemy. My hoarse voice moans while your sweet lips sigh. If I had the choice, I'd choose vogue against void. But for you, old fellow, there ain't no nothingness. Lantern jaw, hollow cheek, I look up to you. Tight mouth, numb, while you sing of God and kingdom come. I struggle with faith and ghosts from somewhere else. Godspeed you and your wife and kids as well. And may you reach the great beyond long before the devil knows you're gone. Although I don't know his bill, I'm sure he never will.
Before we wrap it up, can we just talk about Raindance Kid and where we can find more about the band?
Yeah, we're on Instagram and Facebook, and we have a website. I'm sure your listeners are resourceful, could find it, but I also looked up the links just to be sure. The Instagram is, Raindance_Kid, and the Facebook is just Raindance Kid, no space, no underscore, one word.
Excellent. Great band. Thoroughly enjoyed the gig. Hopefully we get a chance to meet up in face-to-face and you get to play all over again.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Justin, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah,
thanks for taking the time. All the best with all the future projects.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers, Craig.
You made it to the end of another episode of Can't Find My Way Home. Big thanks to Justin. I had a really great time talking about a myriad of things. We had a really in-depth conversation, and what you're hearing is the edited highlight, shall we say. But there's a couple of more clips coming up in the week. We have his top 5, of course. This is what you really want to find out, though, isn't it? Where can you follow Can't Find My Way Home? You can find us on Anchor at anchor.fm. Simply search for Can't Find My Way Home. On Instagram, we are under can't.findmywayhome. Facebook at Expat Music Pod, all one word. Of course, you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts from, you'll no doubt find us there.